The O Cannabis Conference and Expo returns to Toronto June 1st through the 3rd, and there's still some good booth locations available. This exciting event is free for cannabis retailers and will feature Tommy Chong receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award at the O Cannabis Industry Awards. For more information about exhibiting or to register to attend, go to ocannabis.com. That's OCANNABIZ.com.
Well, here it is, another Friday afternoon Green Rush Live. Hi, everybody. I thank God every day, but especially on Fridays because it is the beginning of the weekend. If your week actually ends on Saturday or Sunday. I worked weekends for 30 years, folks, so I know what a Wednesday through Sunday schedule is all about. That being said, we've got a great show for you all over the next couple of hours here. I'm going to be joined by a very special guest host who has his regular show called The Talking Hedge. His name is Josh Kincaid. He hails from Seattle, Washington. Josh, welcome to the guest hosting position of Green Rush Live.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Tell us a little bit about your background rather than me reading about, you're a portfolio risk analyst, blah, 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 blah. Tell us a little bit about your background. Go ahead.
So I left Wall Street about 9 years ago. I was managing a $650 million fund with Capital One. Jumped into the cannabis space, naively thinking I could start a cannabis cafe. And there was a Class C felony that was put on cannabis cafes specifically in Washington State. So I jumped on board to write a bill to try and overturn that. Fast forward 6 years later, chairman of that committee, nothing's happened yet. COVID didn't help, but learned a lot, right? I don't think practice makes perfect. I think failure does. And there's been a lot of projects I've been a part of in the cannabis industry as a consultant with the Super Chronics, things I've reported on with the Talking Hedge podcast and things I've seen. And it's a brutal industry. So excited to see from, an attorney's standpoint, the challenges and issues from a compliance, just from that standpoint alone. It's going to be an interesting conversation.
Absolutely. And joining us now from the law firm Greenspoon Marder are two attorneys, Nick Richards and Michael Burwick. Guys, thank you both for coming on today. And I appreciate you delaying it 1 week because we had no choice. That being said, Nick, how are you doing?
Josh, I'm getting, last time I was on this show, the guest guy, he was really tough on me. And so I'm getting ready for you, Josh. I'm getting really serious over here, Jimmy. So, you got the lawyers on and we're dressed for the occasion and I'm ready to go.
All right. And Michael, you certainly have a tough act to follow. That's all I got to say. How are you doing?
I'm okay, Jimmy. I'm not even going to try to follow that, but I'm speechless. I just got Nick is sort of my our fearless leader of our cannabis group at Greenspoon Marder, and you're beginning to understand why. It's really it's a combination of intellect, experience, and what we in the law call the catch-all. All of the above. And I think what you just saw would fall into the catch-all. He is a tough act to follow.
But I'll tell you what, I love the personality and I love someone who is very uncomfortable being on camera, right? I mean, that's the thing.
That's why I'm hiding behind the glasses, Jimmy.
I like that look, actually.
It's awesome. He's just awesome.
And yet, Jimmy, we're really excited to be on the show today and really excited to talk to your audience. And it's great to work with you. And are we talking taxes today? I got to say as a lead into that, because I do want to be co-host one time too,
okay.
Taxes got sexy when cannabis came along. Okay. So there you go.
No. Did you say something about taxes, guys? I had the memo here different. I thought we were talking about Texas, but
Texas. Oh.
This is good. We've unleashed a couple. Here are very serious attorneys on our show on Friday afternoon, and they're the ones that are carrying on with their personalities, which is fine, guys, because you're going to be on for an hour, so we have some time to kill and fill, and I certainly appreciate that. When I get asked a lot, whenever people come up to me and know that I'm in the cannabis space, they always say, what's a good investment, and by the way, I have no idea about investing. That being said, I always say invest in a good law firm because they're going to be successful no matter what the law says, because they're going to either write the law or they're going to challenge the law. Is that accurate? Yeah. Who's going to take that one?
Well, we have challenged a few laws. Absolutely. I haven't written any myself. I've tried to tell the IRS how to write a few. They don't seem to like what I say generally, but yeah, I think that's right. And I think that it's something, we're sort of creating the rules as we go in many situations, and a lot of times you need a good lawyer to be able to help the regulators understand how to come to the right decision. And that's sometimes an interesting dance. Most regulators don't want you to tell them. They want to get to that on their own. And sometimes that takes somebody who's somewhat artful in the art of persuasion, which my friend Mike is amazing. He persuaded me long ago.
Thank you. I'll take all of that. I'm a Leo, so it's all good. But I would add to that. I think Nick's got me now at sort of like in the sort of the Aquarius kind of stage. But I think I would add to that, Jimmy, that everything that Nick said with an exclamation point. But I would add to that it's really, I see our role kind of as the navigators, and to the extent that there's lack of clarity there on what, to continue the analogy, there's charts there, if you will, that are put in place by not only the Congress, but by the executive branch in terms of how those laws are enacted on a more granular level. And it's sort of our job, and by that I mean the IRS and so forth, it's our job to sort of chart that course for our clients while staying on track and coloring within the lines. But there's also in some cases a lack of clarity, and I think what we like to do is, without coloring outside the lines, is push a little bit at some of the boundaries that are set up in terms of pushing back and saying, hey, you didn't make this clear at all. What did you mean by this? And that kind of thing. And it just matters, to the extent that we do that, on really what the risk tolerance is of the client. And sometimes we have clients that are more aggressive from an ROI standpoint, and they'd like to really push it. And sometimes we have clients that are saying, you know what, I don't want to get wrapped up in a back and forth with the IRS or with any other governmental organization. I'm comfortable just staying right within the parameters of the map, if you will.
And this is when I get to call on Josh to ask the first question, and I'm not even going to tee him up because he knows the most obvious question to ask when you're talking about taxes in the cannabis space. How's that? Is that teeing you up, Josh? Go ahead.
I'm gonna defer 280E for a second because I had a follow up. I wanted to know what kind of keeps you guys up at night. You talked about kind of navigating and not having clarity. So is it the valuations are kind of sketchy? You got $420 million valuation, seems kind of arbitrary. Seems like you're going to have investor lawsuits at some point. What keeps you up at night? Is it the valuations? Is it compliance and lack thereof? Is it federal intervention at some point?
That's what keeps me up, by the way. Go ahead, Nick. What keeps you up at night? Don't and make it clean, will you please? Thank you.
You saw where I was going. No. Yeah, I don't know. Federal intervention does not concern me. And so I want to make that clear. I think that I've been in the cannabis industry for almost 10 years now, I'd say. And I have never seen, the feds come down on a professional in a legalized cannabis, industry in a way that I thought was, like you used to see, right? So not that I don't stay up on that. I worry for my clients. And, as you approach, with me, it's usually about money. We're going to get to taxes next. And so taxes are almost always about money. And, there are events that come up in challenging the IRS or the state or the local authorities around tax matters. And, in the end, it comes down to that money. And that'll keep me awake at night when those events are coming down. And I'll hope that I can do as good for my client as I hope to.
And that is the root of all evil. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, again, just to play off what Nick said a little bit. I don't, I think what we try to do in our practice is to foresee eventualities down the road. I think one of the things that gives me great comfort in the cannabis space is I always go back. It's even in my bio at the firm. Most people at this point, after practicing for almost 30 years, as I have forgotten their undergraduate education in terms of scratching their head and say, what did I even do as an undergrad? I had a very powerful undergraduate education, majoring in sociology and psychology, which seems, a little bit, unless I were maybe a family law attorney or something like that, it seems very far afield from practicing tax, corporate, securities, et cetera, which is sort of the backbone of my practice. But when you get into spaces like I am in terms of industries, cannabis, very heavy, sports law, entertainment law, very heavy. All of this really comes in. And I really try to, one of the things that I really try to do is not only on a micro level to understand where my clients are coming from, what their needs are, what their goals, not just as a business or an entity, but as human beings. I try to do that on a macro level as well. Just to give you an example, New York State is now giving priorities. I just read this yesterday, I think.
That's right. Yep.
Giving priority to, in terms of licensing, to those that have been, convicted under past laws or had issues with cannabis law, with possession and so forth, and under laws that are now moot in the state of New York. So microcosm, yes, but I feel like we're coming around as far as cannabis goes. As Nick said, the first thing that we do as attorneys, the priority of all, is to protect our clients. So in that sense, I think the thing that keeps me up most is the idea that a regulator, in this case, perhaps the IRS, hasn't necessarily caught up with the emerging state of the law, and that we know we're going to win. We know we're right on the law, but it's a matter of we don't want to have to fight needless battles, which costs our clients money. And contrary to popular belief, as lawyers, our objective is not to run up our clients' tab. We want to be doing things that are proactive, that are going to make our clients more money and expand their business. We don't want to get embroiled in a battle with a regulator of any sort on the client. That's money that the client considers wasted, but perhaps necessary. We don't want to do anything to make it more necessary.
And Nick and Michael, I've talked to Michael a couple of weeks ago, and he explained to me something about the tax code that you guys have figured out that may kind of have a big impact on the farming industry. Which one of you guys wants to explain that?
I think we'll both work on it, but Nick, you want to open it up at a high level, and I can, work on it from there.
Yeah. So there's a practice in the ag world outside of cannabis, whereby income is deferred. And so we're looking at some income deferment strategies. And my involvement in that is looking at whether or not Section 280E would impact those strategies. And we don't see that it does. Section 280E, Josh, affects deductions and credits. And these ag strategies are income deferment strategies, which Section 280E does not impact. There's nothing in in the IRS rules that says that I can find that says that a cannabis or that an illegal, somebody who grows something illegally isn't a quote farmer for purposes of the Internal Revenue Code. So, these methods are out there, and they've been used by ag for a long time. And so we're trying to help our clients out and see if we can't utilize some of these strategies in order to save them some money.
Michael, do you want to expound on that a little bit and do us all a favor and explain what that 280E clause is, just in case people aren't familiar with that and really don't understand it. Go ahead.
Jimmy, if you're in the cannabis industry, you know what, I'm sorry, Mike.
No, I'm going to go back to you for the 280E explanation because you live and breathe that world. I mean, I know what it is, but I'm going back to you because whenever somebody needs a good explanation of 280E, I said, hold on a minute. I'm going to get the Encyclopedia Britannica of 280E on the phone, and
it's
the next 4 digits I push or takes extension.
It's okay. I can handle it. No, it basically makes it so that cannabis companies cannot take their deductions. And so Section 280E something says something like, no deductions are allowed for a trade or business that traffics in a Schedule 1 or 2 controlled substance. And so a deduction is a special creature in the tax code that for businesses are allowed to take a current deduction of costs rather than having to put them onto something like cost of goods sold or something like that. So it's where you have to wait till something is sold or wait till your basis is recuperated or something else like that. You get to take that cost now. And so 280E says, hey, cannabis industry or traffickers in controlled substances, which, Jimmy, by the way, which should include the illegal opioid industry. And the IRS is not looking at those guys. And I know I'm getting a little bit askew here, but that's something that I want to talk about because they're in violation of the Controlled Substances Act too. 280E says Schedule 1 or Schedule 2. Anyway, that's what 280E is. It is a creature of the war on drugs. It was created in order to take the profits out of selling illegal drugs. And it has been used in many ways that have been disproportionately horrible for minorities and people of color and everything else. And so it is all tied to that, and it really works. It does take the profit out of most marijuana businesses, and it hurts the little guy way more than it hurts the big guy because it creates really, really, really thin margins. Which if you have higher volume, you can still make money off of. But if you're a mom and pop, you're scraping by.
Right.
Jimmy, that's the perfect segue. It really is. Nick really teed it up in a multitude of ways that he may not even be aware of. Nick's reference to the war on drugs and to the fact that so many of these opioids and everything are not on that schedule or not 280E. I guess I would preface what I'm going to say by the fact that so much of what goes on, even in areas as mundane to most people, exciting to people like Nick, myself, but as tax law, is highly political, highly political. And Nick explained in a way that is detrimental how political some of this stuff is in referencing the war on drugs, referencing social justice issues and racial justice issues and the adverse effect that some of these laws have had over the years on people of color, minorities, etc. I'm going to reference something that happened to be political. Now it's over 100 years ago, so the politics was a little bit different, but that actually creates an opportunity. And that's actually, in retrospect, not a bad thing. Let's go back 103 years or so. I think my math is right, but I was told by Jimmy and Josh that there would be no math. But when we were more of an agrarian society, and when to that end, farmers and regular, I'm not talking about cannabis farmers or hemp farmers, or I'm talking about just plain old vanilla farmers, okay, had commanded a much bigger presence in Washington, D.C. in terms of their lobbying power and so forth. So where am I going with this? You've got a code section in the Internal Revenue Code called 453 or 453. It is the installment sale provision. Now, what does that mean? If I want to buy Jimmy's house, but I can't get a loan from a bank, and Jimmy wants to sell me his house, right? Jimmy can do seller financing, okay? And the tax code makes it possible for me to pay Jimmy some combination of principal and interest, year in and year out, and Jimmy to be able to time the payment of taxes upon his income to when he receives it, and so forth and so on. Now, for 20 years, I've been involved in legal, per the IRS, black letter law, no tax shelters or anything funky, tax deferral strategies, 1031 exchanges on real estate, and 453 using for the sale of businesses and other highly appreciated assets from a capital gains perspective, okay? So when you sell something really big and you've got major capital gains liability on an asset that you've been paying taxes on for years and years and years and years, the idea that you're not going to get hit with a monster tax in 1 year, and we're going to work that out and time it and everything else. Now, I could talk to you for 3 hours on that. I won't. But in my work with 453, one of the things that I uncovered, and I did this in consultation with some people from outside the firm and so forth, but we've really embraced this in the ag space as a firm, is the idea that companies like International Paper, Land O'Lakes Butter, Blue Diamond Almonds, and hundreds of other large ag producers use 453, and here's where the politics comes back in, and certain safe harbors that are baked into 453 that most people outside of big ag corps don't know anything about, to actually time the payment of taxes and create a situation where no taxes are paid in a current year, and all the money comes back to them, and those taxes are kicked way forward, and some money is placed into a fund so that there's the creation for pennies on the dollar of the eventual payment of those taxes 30, 40, 50 years down the road. And to Nick's point, all of that money, and in California, we're talking about, for example, a combined tax rate of over 50%, 37% on the federal and over 13% on the state. And here's where the math does come in. Now, instead of paying 49 and change, of receiving 49 cents and change on the dollar, okay, our strategy will actually return 100 cents on the dollar, less whatever fees are involved, and they're nominal compared to the tax savings to the grower of almonds or whatever. Now, when Nick and I got together, we scratched our heads and said, would this be applicable to cannabis as well? Does cannabis fit in with that ag exception? And I give a lot of credit to Nick for really opening that door. And what we found, and what Nick alluded to earlier in our discussion, was that it does. And it really, this will blow the doors off of the cannabis growing industry, potentially extending to dispensaries and stuff. I want to focus right now on the growers for the sake of this conversation, because we know it applies to them. And we're talking about not paying any taxes in the current year, creating for a small amount of money a fund to pay the taxes way down the road, and being able to deploy all of that income and revenue back into the operation currently.
All right, we're right up against the 4:20 mark on Friday afternoon. When we come back, Michael's going to explain exactly what he said so that I can understand it. Okay, and I'm guessing you guys too. Let me ask before we go to the break, Michael, do you know who Jonathan Edwards is?
Sure.
Oh, good. Nick Richards, have you ever heard Shanty by Jonathan Edwards?
Play it for me, Jimmy.
All right. Josh, Seattle. Have you ever heard of Jonathan Edwards and Shanty?
No.
Okay. This is my song, my 420 song. Okay. When we heard this song on the radio back in the 70s, this was the song that triggered activities. We didn't go to the Louis Pasteur statue like the guys from California did. We just lit up. Okay. I'm perfectly honest about that. It's exactly what we did. This is Jonathan Edwards. We always take this break at 4:20 on Friday. Listen to it. You'll enjoy it. And when we come back, we're going to get more into how this little legalese, if you will, can change not just the cannabis growing community, but the whole farming world. That is what we'll talk about when we come back. Don't go away. Green Rush Live continues after this.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works. It's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard. It's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm going to sit down in my rented car. I'm going to jam it into drive. I'm going to head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Every night and day, we're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA studios.
Pro Cannabis Media and PCM TV programming is supported by Revolutionary Clinics in Massachusetts, the #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 accounting solution for the cannabis industry. And by TCP's Style Lighting Grow Kit, all you need to grow. Josh, that's your cue. Are you going to do a show reset or not?
It's all you, Jimmy. Yeah.
All right. You know, it's not difficult. I bet Nick can do it. Nick, can you do it?
Welcome back. My name's Nick Richards here with Pro Cannabis Media. I got me the biggest stars in the whole land today. I got Josh. I got Jimmy. I got Michael. We are rolling.
That's actually pretty good, Nick. I got to tell you. The name of the show, of course, is Green Rush Live. We're here every Friday afternoon from 4 to 6 p.m. Eastern time on Pro Cannabis Media. And we are talking with a few of our attorney friends from Greenspoon, Marder. They're a national law firm that is based in, are you based in Littleton, Colorado, Nick?
No. I go home there.
Okay.
I do. I go home there.
So is it Denver?
So we have 26 offices across the country. Our headquarters is in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm based in Littleton, but that's Denver. You see behind me there. That's not Littleton.
I get it. All right. I get that. All right. Now, before we went to the break and heard Jonathan Edwards sing Shanty, I threw a question into the chat room. The first person to email me at my company email, and I put that in the chat room, the name of the 3 counties that make up the Emerald Triangle will get one of our limited edition, because I've only got about 46 of these, Pro Cannabis Media t-shirts with my signature saying, "It's a whole new world of weed." Here, I'll do it this way. Right, Dan? There we go.
Very nice, Jimmy.
You notice how it says 46. He knows exactly how many he's signed and how many t-shirts are there. It's not about 50. It's not about 45. He knows there's 46 t-shirts.
46. That's right.
I mean, one thing, I got that chat box up. I don't see anything in there.
Well, I'm waiting to see if anybody has emailed me yet. And no, I have not seen that, but I'll go back to us. And okay, so John Phantom says Humboldt is 1. That was the easiest one. And by the way, at this point, okay, there is something called Google that you could probably find this out in a matter of seconds. And you can email me at Jimmy@Pro Cannabis Media, and I'll send you a t-shirt. All right. So let's go back to the tax strategy that you guys have uncovered. And how revolutionary is this? And who knows about this now, guys?
Nick, you want me to take this, or you want to do it?
Everything we do is revolutionary, Jimmy. But I can't. I've been to that Green Triangle area many times, but I can't remember any of it.
Okay. That being said, is this tax strategy going to change the farming industry? Nick?
It is being used in the farming industry generally. It does change change the industry is a big word, Jimmy. It'll put more money in people's pockets. It'll allow them to grow companies and utilize their revenue in their early years to grow their company and defer their tax liability to later years when they can hopefully take those funds and invest them and get to a point where the economics make sense on all of that kind of stuff, and they do generally in time value of money theory and all that kind of stuff. And I would say as far as the cannabis industry goes, it's particularly attractive because we mentioned social equity earlier, right? And expungement clinics and stuff like that. We're looking back now and we're saying, wait a minute, that was not fair. That was not right. What happened to those people? Well, if you're in the industry right now, you're saying the same thing about Section 280E, that's not right. That can't, it was a thorn and a stab to the industry's heart, because everyone thought it would not be true. And when it turned out to be true, it was so painful that it really is the thing that is holding the industry back. And so if you can take that and push it off into the future and delay the event, maybe in the future there is no 280E tax. Maybe at that point we've come to the position of, hey, wait, that wasn't fair. We should give that back too, right? And I'll also say that the law on Section 280E is not yet resolved. We don't really yet know if it is truly constitutional or not, beyond the United States tax courts and the lower federal courts rulings, because the Ninth Circuit failed to rule on the constitutional questions in the Patients Mutual case. And so that's hopeful. It probably, if you've been following the cannabis various things out there, you learn not to be hopeful, right? But yeah, generally speaking, delaying a taxable event is a good thing.
All right. Go ahead, Michael. Go ahead.
I'd go one step beyond where Nick went. I think, again, being sort of a student of Washington, D.C. and what goes on there, I think when you've got an institution like the Supreme Court, and people say, oh, Supreme Court, and they try to divide up 6-3, conservative justices, liberal justices, and you've got, rumblings and some offhanded comments by the most conservative member, perhaps, of the court, that being Justice Thomas, about everything with respect to, to cannabis and enforcement of cannabis laws and scheduling and everything else. I think that there is an awareness on the entire political spectrum, with some notable exceptions. You're going to have some people probably that still believe in the prohibition of alcohol, and you're never going to change those people. But I think it is an absolute minority in Washington, small m minority, that is still under the impression that people need to be protected, from cannabis. As far as revolutionary goes, I mean, you take 280E, which is a huge thorn in the side financially of growers out there. But you just take any business. It's not, and again, I'm looking at this from an equity standpoint. One of the things that I try to do, and one of the things that's a hallmark of my practice outside the cannabis industry, is to take some of the tricks that I've learned in dealing with entities of considerable wealth, as well as high net worth and ultra high net worth families, individuals, couples, etc., and to try to bring some of those tricks of the trade down to your regular, more run-of-the-mill people. And the idea that from a general ag standpoint, there is a legal way to time and defer and take some control back over the way, the timing, the amount, and so forth. Ultimately, you're going to pay the same amount of taxes, but do you want to pay those taxes now, or do you want to set a few dollars aside each month and pay them, let them accrue and pay them 40 or 50 years from now? That's all completely legal, kosher, whatever word you want to use, within the framework of the IRS. We're not going outside the black letter law of the Internal Revenue Code for anything that we do in the tax deferral area. Notice I didn't say tax avoidance area, tax deferral area. But that deferral is worth a lot of money in the pockets of growers of all different types of agricultural products, including cannabis, and the power that they have to reinvest in their businesses, to expand, to diversify. Maybe they don't want to be solely in cannabis. Maybe they want to take some of that money that they would have paid to the government and invested in Berkshire Hathaway stock. Whatever, they can do that, and that makes them more powerful. It gives them more staying power as companies, and they need to be around for a while, because this industry is solid, it's growing, and we don't want to see this industry get dominated by, a handful of powerful entities. We want to see this be a democratic, institution where everybody can play.
Yeah, it's fair. And certainly the pie's big enough. Josh, I want to get your reaction to what you just heard from our two attorney friends, and what impact do you think it will have down the road on this industry? Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, the financial impact of 453 is interesting, but I think in order to understand that and kind of have a full understanding, you have to compare that to what impact 280E would have if you were to remove that. So the financial impacts of 280E and being able to write off labor, which is probably your most expensive, or at least one of your most expensive line items, and the ability to write off that labor is going to make a lot of these pot stocks immediately overnight look a lot more advantageous, a lot more profitable, and have their bottom line, the profitability, look a lot better. So right off the bat, just from a fundamental standpoint, it's going to have a huge impact. And yet that's probably minuscule by comparison to what, at least from my understanding, I've never heard of it before, just hearing it now, but I can just know that a small little segment of 280E versus having complete tax deferral is a massive opportunity. And we're all focusing on 280E, and yet 453 seems like a crazy opportunity. I say hyperbolic stuff like 85% of all CBD companies will fail unless they have an entity in Puerto Rico utilizing Act 60, not paying federal income tax and saving 37% and having that margin, because we're talking about thin razor margins in agriculture. Cannabis is just, one of those. So if someone's in Puerto Rico and they're competing against someone in California, how can you compete with somebody making 37% more than you? And the short answer is that you don't. There is no competition to that. So every entity, every 453, 280E, you're clinging on to the hope of increasing your margins. And these are just one of those tools in order to be able to do that and try to compete and pivot to stay relevant for one more day.
Bud Tracker wins the t-shirt, by the way. Just want to throw that out there. The chat room is starting to go back and forth a little bit, which is always fun. I got to ask a question of all three of you guys. Nick, you said something off the top that I didn't jump on, but I'm going to go back to it now. You're actually confident that our federal government can institute a regulatory system to legalize the cannabis plant. And I want to know, is the plant going to fall under the Department of Agriculture, Food and Drug Administration, or the DEA?
Yes.
Yes, all three. Is that what you're saying?
ATF.
ATF is the other one, right? Alcohol and tobacco and firearms, right? So we have all these entities in DC, and you're confident that one of them, all of them, little bits and pieces of each one of them. I have not heard anybody in the industry that is confident about our federal government coming up with a plan that makes sense.
Are you saying I said that?
Yeah, you did. I heard you say it. I was like,
well,
confident about federal?
Well, let me say this. So we actually had, I think actually it's a little bit of an exciting time on that. We saw two Republican bills come out last year, right? And there's a lot of talk around those two bills, and of course Schumer bill. We're going to see a revised Schumer bill come out in the next couple of months, so that's very exciting as well. So I think that what one of the things that I thought of earlier in our discussion around sort of the impact and where the states are and all that kind of stuff, the fact that we have these two Republican bills out there is a big deal, because now both sides are showing their cards. Both sides are saying, hey, this is what we think will work. And the exciting thing about the states reform bill, I think the Nancy Grace bill, is 3% tax on the federal bill.
Right.
That's a great rate for the industry. The industry should be rallying behind that. I think there's some problems with that bill, of course, but there's always problems with the bill. And a 3% tax in the federal tax like that would really help the industry get past, one of its biggest problems, which is, those folks who are not part of the industry, the traditional market. And so, that was a big disappointment when we saw some of those early legislation from Schumer had 15 to 25% tax. That's not going to help anybody.
No.
Boy, now, Michael, we're really looking to defer some tax, right? But the point is that, Jimmy, that tax is the price of legalization, but we cannot tax it so high that it prevents legalization from eliminating the problems that legalization is supposed to overcome, right? And you know, but the reality of it is that there will be the tax. If you're a cannabis company out there and you're thinking, man, I can't wait till 280E goes away because then we'll be able to make all this money. Think again, there's going to be another tax. And it's not just going to go away 100%, right? So, you know, that's not a realistic, you know, planning objective.
So let's get back to my alphabet soup question. Where do you think will there be a separate cannabis regulatory board?
What do we need that for, Jimmy?
I don't think we need it at all. You got enough you have so much red tape in DC. They can't even decide who's going to handle hemp and how much CBD is going to be allowed to go into food and drug.
I'll play devil's advocate with that one because the banking industry has an SRO. They're the ones that have a self-regulatory organization. So they implement all of the rules for themselves and then hand that over to the government and make it way too complicated so that they don't want to sound stupid and, you know, bruise their egos, so they don't ask a lot of questions and then everything gets passed. Cannabis needs to do the same thing. We can't expect that, you know, the senators and these bureaucrats are going to do anything for us. We need an SRO. And I think like having the FDA try to absorb cannabis is a failure waiting to happen. Just look what happens in Washington State when we dissolve the liquor control board and make it the liquor and cannabis board. They didn't want to deal with cannabis. We threw it at them and they hate us. And it's evident in a lot of their policies and legislature. So having an SRO that's built from the ground up specifically for cannabis that can copy something similar to what the banking industry does, I think it would be a lot more advantageous for the industry than just allowing some of these alphabet soups to gain control and restrict and give it to big ag, big cannabis, and kind of let these small farmers just dwindle out. I was in banking. I saw what the SBA did or didn't do, rather. I never once saw one SBA loan go through in my entire banking career, not one. So look what the states are doing, dragging their feet with social equity. We can't allow the government to do for take control. They self-regulatory organization. I have spoken.
That was very good. Right at the end, though, your Wi-Fi kind of chugged a little bit. So can you repeat I get it. We all get that. Self-regulatory would be, I would think, embraced by the industry. I'm not sure if that's going to happen or not. I am not confident at all with what's going on in Washington, D.C. If anybody watches this show, they know that I'm pretty outspoken about that. I think our two-party system is broken. I think that we have too many senators hanging around for 50 years. Term limits have to be put in place because that Senate does not look like our country. The House of Representatives has a little bit better reflection of what's going on in our country right now, not the Senate. That being said, I want to get Nick and Michael involved with this discussion. A self-regulatory board, can that happen, guys?
In theory, I mean, my frame of reference is actually from the securities industry is FINRA. And, you know, I'm going to get pilloried if any of my FINRA people see this, but FINRA is one of the most dysfunctional organizations that's out there. For anyone that doesn't know, FINRA is the financial and regulatory authority that self-polices the securities, quote unquote, industry. Basically, in lay terms, you know, stockbrokers, brokerage houses, that kind of thing. And FINRA has basically it's sort of the tail wagging the dog. FINRA has taken such extraordinary steps. It's what we call form over substance in many cases, that, you know, if you miss a day here on a deadline, or you didn't cross this T or dot this I, you're out of business, or you're fined an arbitrary $25,000 or $100,000. And when you're talking about small firms, that's real money. It's not real money to Goldman Sachs, but it's real money to your stockbroker down the street that's got a bunch of partners and they're trying to keep their licensure up. So for that reason, and for a number of other reasons, but we've seen a huge migration in the securities industry from the model of the broker dealer, meaning they make their money on transactions, okay, to the model of the registered investment advisor, which is governed solely by the Securities and Exchange Commission. The FINRA is out of the loop entirely, and there are just a lot of financial services professionals out there that are independent, not part of a big Wall Street firm, that have just said, to heck with it, I'm done, and they've exited and gone to a fee for service. They take an annual fee every year for managing your money. It becomes part of whether if you win, they win, and your money goes down, they make a little less, and so forth, rather than this transactional model that FINRA polices. And it's been a disaster. So I think if you do go with an SRO model, it needs to be one that is very that needs to take a lesson from where FINRA went wrong, because that's a very, very dysfunctional situation over there.
Nick, you want to weigh in on that?
Jimmy, there's so many regulations that govern, state regulations that govern these cannabis companies already. The federal government doesn't, there will already be jurisdiction in various federal agencies, but they're here in the US, right? These federal agencies have jurisdiction over them. The IRS isn't going away just because we legalize it or anything like that, right? So to me, it doesn't feel like we need more regulation. What we need is the federal government to get out of the way and let the states do it. They're already doing it, and move forward.
Yeah, to me, a simple move off Schedule 1 will have such an impact, positive impact on the industry alone, that it's an administrative. This is what Steve D'Angelo told me years ago. It's an administrative thing, and I think I actually saw some of the U.S. senators are asking if they can go directly to the DOJ to get them to deschedule it. I'm sure I saw that news item over the last 2 weeks. Have you guys seen that?
I know that there's some buy-in by the AG on this, by Merrick Garland. I've read some things that this is a DOJ that's favorable to that, I believe. Yeah. And I just go one step further and say, in Washington, everything is about money. And to tie in with everything that we're going through in the wake of COVID, and with a major international, I'm hesitant to use the word World War III, but check in with me in a week or two. But everything that's going on in Europe right now, Ukraine, Russia, et cetera, potentially involving China, Taiwan, we don't know how far this is going to spread, and also even within Europe, what Putin's got his eyes on next after Ukraine. The bottom line is that we are, you saw at 1:30 in the morning, $1.5 trillion spending bill went through the other night. At 1:30 in the morning, nobody has any idea what's in it at all, except there's some money in there for Ukraine, which is nice. But we are so deep in the hole financially that, apropos of my comments earlier, as far as the inertia in DC to get something done with, as Nick said before, 3%, whatever, is still a heck of a lot of money when it comes to, the demand for cannabis, our ability to grow it, and everything else. That there's going to be some people scratching their heads in Washington, the smart people, that are going to understand that you can backfill a lot of that deficit over time without gouging the cannabis consuming public by just legalizing and taking a few percentage points. So. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'll tell you what's in that bill. So status quo, Jimmy, is what's in that bill. No change. It's still what was formerly known as Rohrabacher Farr is still limited to medical. There's no safe banking in there. It's status quo, I think. Josh, is that what you're seeing in that bill?
Status chaos is what it is. Status chaos. At least that's the way I look at it, or stagnation, however you want to look at it. Michael, you brought up what's going on in Russia and Ukraine. Our lead story on We Talk News is the detaining of the WNBA superstar and two-time Olympic gold medalist Brittany Griner in Russia for carrying hash oil to an airport. She played professional basketball in Russia as well. This is a very difficult time to deal with Russia. Like the U.S. is not going to be looking for a favor. Am I right? How ugly can this get? And this is just an opinion, guy, not legal, but I think she's in big trouble myself.
I'll take a first stab at this and I'll be brief. This has absolutely, positively nothing to do with hash oil or anything else. I promise you that the people over in Russia knew that she was a consumer of hash oil long before she ever left for the airport or anything else. They did nothing about it. This was an opportunity to detain an American for something that was on the surface illegal under Russian law. But they did it to prove a point and to flex their muscles for the United States and the rest of the world. It could have been anything else. They were just looking for a premise to detain her. This is not a hash or a cannabis issue whatsoever. This is a Russia issue. And they, again, the entire time she played over there in the off season, they could have come into her apartment and, arrested her at any time because they know everything.
Did they entrap her? Did they put it in her bag?
I love you, Jimmy, but you're attributing American jurisprudence over to Russia. So in Russia, they would say, entrapment. What is Jimmy talking about? We don't have entrapment. We don't have entrapment over here, So
no, this is what we do here, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is like Cheerios in the morning,
All right, one more question I got for you guys about MRBs. Okay, marijuana-related businesses. That is the technical term in the banking world for companies like mine that give the industry a voice and also take sponsorship dollars from the cannabis industry. We are an ancillary company. We don't touch the plant. We don't have any links on our site that go to any dispensaries. And we are still an MRB according to the banks. Are they going to ease up on that? I'm starting to see and hear about some banks that have like tier 1 that are plant touching MRBs and tier 2, like a media company, like a container company, like a paper company that is working with the industry and taking money from it. But it is not a plant touching one. Is this where we're at right now? And can we change that?
Jimmy, MRBs, as you call them, need to be concerned about one thing: Form 8300. Okay, Form 8300, Jimmy. If you're providing services to a cannabis company, they're paying you cash. I know we all go, we don't take cash. At some point, you will if you're in this industry, and you need to know about Form 8300. Which is the form that you file when you get more than 10,000 cash from someone. And so that's really, really important for MRBs. The IRS audits those MRBs and makes sure that they're filing their forms 8300. Cool. Which of course is a bank's concern as well. Bank Secrecy Act is what's behind the banks not wanting to have cannabis companies because of the reports that they have to file when you bring in the cash into the bank, right? I don't see any change in this until there's change in banking. And it all comes down to the individual banks and their comfort level. And that all comes down to their clients and how their clients are interacting with their banks. And so I've seen cases where cannabis companies have lost their bank accounts for silly things, but it's really because there's a history of silly things. And the banks get to the point where they're like, look, we're done. Go away.
Yeah. Interesting. We're almost up against it. Josh, I'd like to throw it back to you. Do you want to ask these two fine attorneys any questions or opinions before we say goodbye?
Yeah, curious if you guys think if any of the banks or credit unions are at risk of losing their charter at this point. You have one in Colorado that's going public, a credit union, and it seems kind of mainstream at this point. So if they're willing to go public and disclose all these records, it's signaling to me that money talks and we're here for the long run. So are these just kind of demonstrating to the feds that it's a business that should be implemented and that that banks shouldn't worry about losing their charter?
Nick, I'll throw it back to you.
Okay.
Nick?
Yeah, no, don't worry about that. I think that I have seen some things from some banks that I thought was interesting. In order for a bank to be a real big cannabis player, there's some problems around the averages that banks have to have. They can't be overly invested in one class of depositors. Too much risk there. So they have to have a diversified depositor pool, and that gets them into trouble if they're the cannabis bank. And there's some interesting workarounds in that banks deploy that you look and you think, well, if that was a cannabis company, they'd never get away with that. So maybe money does talk. I hope that bank succeeds. I think it's good for the cannabis industry if they do, and it's good for banking if they do as well. The banking thing is silly. It needs to be solved, it's just.
And your representative, Ed Perlmutter, has said he's going to be a pest about getting it, like he hasn't been a pest over the last, 10 years of being in office, but that's his charge. Michael Burwick and Nick Richards from Greenspoon Marder. Look, I always learn when I talk to really smart people like you guys, okay? And I really appreciate you taking the time out to explain this new tax strategy that you've discovered. And if people want to ask you questions, let's give Michael's email out. Michael, how do people find you?
Oh, very simply. You can email me at Michael, Michael, dot or period, whatever you prefer, Burwick, Burwick, at GM, as in General Motors or Greenspoon Marder, whatever you prefer, law.com. And I would say that you can do the same thing with my partner and colleague and friend, Nick Richards, except it's nick.richards@gmlaw.com.
You don't have to spell it out. I think we got Nick Richards under control.
Nick's got an easier. I mean, Michael Burr's not that difficult.
Write that down.
I'm going to give you the Cyrillic spelling for all of our Ukrainian and Eastern European.
Wait, I'm getting ready again. Here we go.
Oh, here we go.
There he goes. This is the big finish. All right,
Jimmy. Nick, so this is a microfiber moisture cloth. Greenspoon Marder logo. We used to call these do-rags back when I was a kid, but I don't think
I still do.
You still call that a do-rag? Yeah.
I guess I haven't had my formal initiation yet because I don't have one of those, and I'd like to get
How
one.
about the pink sunglasses? Do you have those, Michael?
I don't have those either. My daughter has one. I borrow them from time to time. So.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. We've got 3 CEOs who are on hold that are going to join us over the next hour, and we'll meet them after this break. Don't go away. Green Rush Live continues after this. Hey. You want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information.
Hi, my name's Tai Chang. I'm the president and founder of Aloha Green Apothecary in Hawaii. We're a vertically integrated medical cannabis company with 3 dispensaries, 1 extraction lab, and 1 cultivation center near the North Shore of Oahu. We have over 150 employees now, and we've been working with Adaptive HR to meet our human resource needs. We're super excited to work with them as we expand, and we've grown at least 2-3 times over the last 2 years. So we look forward to a good relationship with Adaptive, and come visit us in Hawaii anytime. Aloha.
Hi, my name is Janice O'Reilly. I'm a partner with AAF CPAs. a national CPA firm that specializes in cannabis. We're based out of Boston. We have been working with Adaptive HR for several years and have recommended them to our clients, who have all been extremely happy with their service and their responsiveness.
Calling All Growers with Liz Grow is supported by The Grow Kit from StyleLighting.shop, Adaptive HR, built for your cannabis business, Revolutionary Clinics, where the patient comes first, by Accounting Buds, your accountant in cannabis, and by Salient Video Surveillance Systems for today and tomorrow's security.
You would think that it is. However, there's quite a bit of debate right now in the accounting industry when it relates to cannabis with this exact question. I'm part of a few different networking groups that are solely accountants for cannabis companies. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth in those communities and discussion regarding whether 280E, if it went away, if the administration legalized cannabis or took it off of Schedule 1, what would happen? And it could go either way right now. The debate is it can make the accountant's life much easier. That's what a lot of the inexperienced accountants are saying right now, it seems, whereas the accountants that have been in this industry for a while and have gone through the same thing that happened with hemp a few years ago are saying that will make lives more difficult, because when hemp became declassified a while back, the accounting became more complicated.
All right, welcome back to the Friday afternoon Green Rush Live. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media, joined this week by my guest host, Josh Kincaid from Seattle, Washington. Josh, say hello.
Hello.
Good job, Josh. He does a show called The Talking Hedge. Hey, give yourself a little plug. How often do you do that? Where can people find it? Go ahead.
The Talking Hedge is on your favorite cannabis, on all your podcasts. So 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, a lot of episodes. We're everywhere.
You do a show every day.
Yeah, I mean, between 10 minutes and an hour.
Wow. I mean, I thought I was nuts doing 3 shows a week, but that's a completely different entity. But I admire your work ethic, and you've been a very nice guest host so far. So let's keep it going. Let's meet our next 2 guests. They're both CEOs. You know, now I'm not going to compare the CEO to the other CEO, but I'm going to start with Kim Real from Azuka. Tell us about Azuka, and I understand you're an edible company in New Mexico, and that's all I know. So tell me a little bit about you.
Sure. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Azuka, partnered with my co-founder, Ron Silver, who's a chef in New York City. So we are sort of New Mexico and New York based, and we are an advanced formulations company for edibles. So what we do is we create formulations that make ingestible cannabis fast acting, great tasting, and very easy to manufacture in ingestible form. And then we license our formulations and provide a proprietary non-infused precursor to edibles companies to make their edibles fast acting, great tasting, and very easy to make.
Cool. Very good. And speaking of chefs, we've got one. We've got Chef Nikki right here. Nick, tell us a little bit about what you're up to, what you do.
So my name is Chef Nick E. I am from the Herbal Creative Kitchen, AKA Kitchen. I spell it K-I-T-H-C-E-N, completely intentional.
I get it. That's that THC thing. Yeah, I got ESPN, man. Good stuff. All right.
Excellent. So I'm specializing in doing lots of infusions. So on the spot infusions, if somebody wants to learn how to infuse their own products for dispensaries or people creating products to kind of showcase their products to bud tenders. So say just how Azuka, say they have some terpene profiles they want to showcase in with their bud tenders at a certain location. So that's where I will come in and use that. So they'll just gain a little bit more knowledge about that, be able to taste other things, be able to complement it, and overall just be able to sell the product a little bit more. And as well, just doing private events and, educational events, just everything, getting involved with people, getting educated about the plant and how it's infused with food, especially, and in beverages, and how everybody can learn with that.
Very cool. And of course, private parties, right, Chef Nikki?
Yes, of course. So private parties is a big thing, especially with big brands, just doing a lot of grand opening kind of stuff. Like I do have almost a basic food truck set up with a pizza oven, smoker to do whole product launches or barbecues outside of your location, and all like showcasing terpene profiles, just in case we're naming our pizza, maybe a margarita pizza, say, so to speak, or just, going along with the themes without necessarily being completely infused all the time. But then there is the private party aspect about it as well, depending on the liabilities, of course.
Kim, I want to ask you the next question about interstate commerce. We all know that it's not allowed technically, right? Legally, if you will. However, in the edible space, you guys have recipes, basically. Am I right? And you have a license that's a intellectual property that you can share with other states where they can make that same recipe in that state, correct?
Correct. So our formulations are now in, I think, about 14, growing to probably 20 some states by the end of this year. We're in Canada, we're expanding in Europe. We have products in Asia and South America. So because of the flexibility of our formulations, we can actually ship anywhere in the world because we don't ship any active ingredients. So we put the precursors in our partners' hands and they activate it and are off to the races. So we kind of have this magic business model and formulation kit that lets us sort of leapfrog over this interstate commerce limitation.
Yeah. And again, Josh, I'm going to bring you in because I want to get your opinion about this. We all know, in fact, we had a trivia question about the 3 counties in the Emerald Triangle to give away a t-shirt earlier. 80% of the legacy market comes out of that Emerald Triangle inside the United States, the illegal market, if you will. That's flower going across state lines that is not detected. And yet there's a legal entity here who shares a intellectual property, a recipe for an edible. She's all over the country. Is this fair?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair. It's how normal business should be conducted. If you're trying to become essentially a multi-state operator, if you look at any other regular business model, whether it's Pepsi or Coca-Cola, they have regional facilities. So you have maybe a spot in, New Mexico where everything is made, all your secret ingredients, everything that's proprietary, or your secret intellectual property, and then distributed to your regions from there. And then your partners have the water and the general components that they add to it. So it makes sense to me. I just want to know why infused coffee isn't a thing. I mean, I'm in Seattle and infused coffee, K-Cups that's not real coffee, in my opinion. I'm waiting for, that's kind of my indicator of normalization is like when you have coffee and it's everywhere, then I think maybe that the beverage category you can start getting excited about it. Until then it's regional. And I think maybe coffee is kind of that bellwether indicator of beverage normalization. So hopefully infused coffee will be a thing. I'm ready for it.
Now, I'm guessing that the other 2 guests on our show are all for infusing all these kinds of products, all these cannabinoids and terpenes into as many different food items as they possibly can, especially at private events, Chef Nikki, right?
Of course.
Let me ask you a question. And I know what the answer is, but I want you to explain it to people. We all know, and we talk about responsible use of cannabis. We all hear the mantra to start low and go slow, especially when you're dealing with an edible product? Because for the most part, people who have had edible experiences, there's always one bad experience that is a funny story to tell, but while you're inside that uncomfortable reaction, it is not pleasant at all. How do you, as a chef at a private party, screen the people you're feeding?
So specifically for that, there is a few steps. So first of all, we are making sure that everybody knows what they're consuming and is knowledgeable about it. Say if it is a private party and there is alcohol there, to be knowledgeable about that as well. So we obviously don't recommend that, but obviously for the dosing standpoint, just as it is, my specialty is doing multi-course dinners. So every single course, maybe your beverage or your food course, whether it's a small bite or it's a full entree, will be kind of dosed accordingly. So it'll be maybe your first course, you'll get 1 milligram, 2 milligrams, depending on what you actually state in the beginning of the meal. So in the beginning of the meal, I'm going around to the table, taking dosage preferences from each guest, making sure if they want actual dosage in their meal whatsoever, if they just want CBD, low dosage, medium, or high. So that way that they can kind of gauge with that. And then everything is slower. And at any point, because it is a multi-course, between 4 to 8 to 10 courses, you at any time could gain a little bit more or actually take away a little bit more. So that way you'll feel comfortable in the event. And a big thing that I also do is how we just talked about is different infusions. So every single thing in each course is also a different infusion. As you know, every type of infusion affects the body a little bit differently. So our fat will probably take a little longer for our body to metabolize, while a sugar might take a little bit longer as well. But then when we go to glucose and sucrose, and that's probably what Azuca's use, or I'm not saying anything like that, but just something that the body metabolizes a little bit easier. So that's why we'll get a little bit more fast acting without using actual alcohol in there. And then, because alcohol would obviously secrete in the system a little bit quicker than anything else. But so
alcohol
different types of sugars and different types of fats. So it's all this whole science behind it of how all these cannabinoids are going to affect you at a certain time throughout the experience.
Yeah. And that's great. And that's a responsible approach to your culinary wisdom, Chef Nikki. Okay.
Yeah.
And
thank you.
And you're responsible for people, then the reactions. And the worst thing that can happen is you get a newcomer who's never had any experience at all and gets too much, gets one of those uncomfortable experiences and never wants to do it again. Right. We all want, right? Am I right?
Yeah, nano emulsification should fix that, though. If there's a faster onset, then you don't have to wait an hour to say, hey, should I take this second cookie? And so with nano emulsification and the faster uptake and the quicker high should, in theory, avoid that, which is almost unfortunate that the newcomers coming up don't have that story to tell about how they OD'd on edibles. But, that's also a good thing.
Yeah,
right.
I was going to
go ahead.
These are great opportunities to educate, especially newcomers to edible or ingestible cannabis, about the different ways that the body actually can metabolize ingestible cannabis. So traditional edibles that are not, using a formulation like ours, they are metabolized by the liver, what's called first pass metabolism. And what that does is it breaks the distillate, usually the delta 9 THC, down into something called 11-hydroxy THC. Happens in your liver, and that's why traditional edibles take so long, right? It just takes a long time for your body to do that work. And it also, the 11-hydroxy THC is what produces more of the traditional edibles effect of the couch lock, more sedative effect. But there's other ways you can enjoy ingestible cannabis. For example, our formulations, because they're absorbed in the soft tissue, they're a hydrophilic, water-seeking encapsulation of the THC molecule. When they're ingested, they're absorbed quickly, and they actually remain delta 9 THC. So the consumer can experience more of a smoker's effect, like more of a euphoric effect from the THC instead of the 11-hydroxy THC of traditional edibles. So there's a great opportunity to educate consumers about this array of ways to experience cannabis. And I think that's the real key to avoiding those bad experiences that you're talking about that so many people have had with edible or ingestible cannabis.
It was certainly bad advice from the first bud tender with my medical card I ever got. And it was an uncomfortable 33 milligram experience, let's just say. But as my life philosophy, and anybody who knows me, any of my friends out there know, as long as you live to tell the story, it's okay. At least that's I feel. How important is quality control, Kim? And what kind of things do you have in place as a business to make sure that the product that comes out with your brand and your labeling in New Mexico is the same product that might be in Michigan or California or even Massachusetts?
Sure. I mean, so we have standard, food safety protocols for all of the stuff that we do in terms of our pre-infused ingredients. And then for anything that is the infused ingredient, so when you add the active cannabinoid, THC or CBD or any other cannabinoid, we have a protocol of everything is tested 3 times before it goes to the consumer, right? The extract distillate is tested once. It's typically tested a second time by a different lab. Then it goes into a finished product. Sometimes there's an intermediary product that is tested a 3rd time, and then finished product tested a 4th time for potency, heavy metals, contaminants, et cetera. So we really believe in at least 3 steps along the quality control process of testing for all the things that the consumer cares about. So potency and cannabinoids.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Josh, I'm going to ask you, I'm going to ask you to ask a question. I'm going to give you a little time to think about it, and then I'm going to throw it to you. Go ahead, Josh.
Question about if you guys think about cannabis cafes. We mentioned earlier here on the podcast about how it's a Class C felony in Washington State, but I kind of view it as the window into the soul of the community. So as soon as we can find, where you don't have to have private events, where you can have these events where people can dine together and you can see that and you can normalize it, and it's not taboo anymore, where it's a windowless establishment and there's nefarious things going on inside where you're eating food with plants and herbs. It needs to just kind of be legalized and normalized. Do you guys feel that cannabis cafes are that next step forward?
100%.
Oh, go ahead, Kim.
So social consumption is going to happen. It's already written into statute in 9 states, and different states have approached it a little bit differently. But what's going to be key to social consumption normalization is having products, and I see it sort of falling out into 2 different, there'll be kind of smoking lounges that are akin to cigar lounges. And then there'll be non-smoking, which I think will be, they'll have many different manifestations, right? Some of them will look more like an Erewhon, like a, functional beverage type offering. Some will be like a coffee shop. Some will look like a high-end wine bar or cocktail lounge, depending on the proprietor. But the key is to having the cannabinoids in each of those settings delivered in a way that the consumer knows exactly what they're getting. They understand what a dose of socially consumed cannabis is. They understand the effect it's going to have on them if they're a 2 milligram dose or a 5 or a 10 milligram dose, and that the proprietors of those establishments really source their cannabis ingredients in a way that allows them to deliver those predictable effects. So it's a space that we're actually doing a lot of work in, because our formulations are really perfectly designed to enable all of those entrepreneurs in social consumption to deliver that great customer experience.
So Executive Chef Nikki, are you going to be an executive chef of a social consumption lounge? Is that the end?
And I love what Azuka is saying right now. So that's awesome. That's exactly what I'm trying to do basically with the brand, is create all those, type of regulations for that social consumption as well, because it will be, and that's how I formulate the dinners as well when people are dosing. So it's either using correct dosage, using droppers, or weighing the oil or butter that I'm formulating perfectly, so everybody is getting the correct dosage that they're expecting. So that's like a huge thing, and that's great that you have it already formulated and everything and ready to go.
I'm gonna ask Josh a question. You do a show every day with the Talking Hedge, okay? How much science do you have in your background to ask good questions? Because there's so much science now attached to cannabis.
Zero. I took a D waiver, honestly. It was the only D I got in college. So
I took astronomy for my science at Tufts, okay? And that had not, because I did not want, my extent of science is when I dismembered the frog in 10th grade for biology. That was pretty much it. I was like, okay, I'm done with science. I don't want to know. I don't care what happens after that. But just through osmosis, I listened to Kim talking about it. There's a ton of science that goes into making these products. Isn't there, Kim?
You know, absolutely. But what I think is important is, and what I love about what we do is demystifying the cannabis plant for my mom, right? This is a wonderful medicinal healing plant that's been scary, pretty much all my lifetime. And I think that it's time to use science to actually get to what I call the simplicity on the other side of complexity. So that it's, you talked about infused coffee. My first cannabis edibles experience was Ron's formulations before the company was launched, and it was infused into coffee. And I'm like, wow, this is an amazing product. So it's really using science to make it really simple and approachable.
Yeah. I'm amazed at what goes on with this plant since 1971. Which is when I started using cannabis as a 14-year-old ADHD guy that had no clue what ADHD was and really didn't have much of a clue about weed either. But I knew that I was getting sick on 3 beers and I was getting crap from my friends for not being able to hold my beer. And by the way, growing up, the drinking age was 18. And this is an adult use plus 21 product. Josh, what's your feeling about the plus 21 for adults? And are we, or should we go back to 18 and put everything at 18 and really stress education before they even get to 21? Josh?
I think it's interesting when you look at something like Amsterdam, you go there and the locals don't really dive into it because it's not this thing where I think with kids, they're like rubber bands. And if you pull them hard enough, they're just going to spring forward and go and check it out. So, when I was in high school and we would go and binge drink every Friday and Saturday night, it was because we didn't have anything else to do and you weren't supposed to. And so we were going to naturally rebel against that. But cannabis for me was a thing where it was like, everyone must have been smoking indica because I always attributed it to lazy stoner stereotype. It wasn't this euphoric, energetic, uplifting experience like coffee and cannabis that we have now. I didn't know the difference between that. And so I'm kind of hesitant because I don't necessarily think someone at 18 should self-medicate, but I think it's way better than using opioids and anything else. I think as recreation goes, that maybe should just stay at 21 because I think 18-year-olds are not fully developed or, emotionally or intellectually mature enough to go out and do recreational products like cannabis. Not that it's going to hurt them, but mentally they're still evolving and maturing and growing.
I actually think the 20-somethings that I have on my staff are more mature than I am. Okay. And I'm 64. Okay. So I just want to say that. Kim, what's your feeling about 18, 21, educating kids, and it sounds like you came up through the DARE era. Am I right?
Oh yeah. Nancy Reagan, just say no, mom, right here. Yeah. For sure. So I think first and foremost, we need a lot more science, a lot more studies on the effect of cannabis on the adolescent and growing brain. I'm not a medical professional, but the studies that I have seen would instruct that it's contraindicated while the brain is still developing. So much like, alcohol is a poison, right? That you don't really actually want to encourage the 18 to 24-year-olds or younger to be using cannabis. So that's my concern, is that we have good science and good education on the effect of this and any other material on these lovely developing human brains.
Yeah. Well, now it explains kind of why I'm as crazy as I am. Chef Nikki, what's your feeling about 1821? Is it a magic time, or is it, to me, it's really the ability to understand how it affects the human body?
I feel like it's definitely an exploratory time. Like it's definitely a time where somebody would be more interested in trying it, so it could be open to that. But just how she was saying, just more about the education about it. And I feel like if these kids or everybody is educated around that time, they can choose to consume. And 18 doesn't really seem, I don't really want to say this on the air, but I've smoked as a young child. So I know I've been doing it since at like middle school, high school. So it's just kind of like a thing that has been going on. And I know it affects everybody a little bit differently, but just, the sciences about it, it's good to know about how it affects the brain differently. Just how alcohol, obviously we're not promoting children or promoting younger people to be drinking alcohol at a younger age, because we know the effects of it. So it's just that kind of the same exact way. As long as everybody is responsible with it and knows what they're getting into, I feel like that way we can come to a conclusion.
All right. So obviously I have I literally checked into my dorm room on my 18th birthday when the drinking age was 18. Okay. I've always felt I was blessed because when it turned to 21, I was 21. That being said, I know I've never enjoyed alcohol. A lot of people can drink you under the table, hollow leg. I mean, this is part of our culture here in the United States where alcoholism is an issue. Europe does not have an alcohol problem. They do not have alcoholics as much as we do in the United States of America. Why? Because the parents educated them at a young age, and they managed to show them the responsible use of alcohol. Why can't that happen with cannabis? Josh, what's your feeling about that?
I think it's a cultural thing. We really like to throw stigmas. If you go to Eastern Europe, you go to Russia, they don't even have.
I'm not going to Russia anytime soon. I'm going to tell you that right now. Go ahead.
I'm just saying, like, they don't have a term for alcoholism, so they would look at us and say, "Why do you even have a term for that?" We obviously there's issues and people have issues, but I just think that we love to stereotype and stigmatize a lot of things and play, doctor. It's a pastime in the U.S.
Gotcha. Kim, you're feeling about the rant I just had? And if you don't feel like answering, you'd say you don't have to. Bless you, Nick.
Thanks.
Sorry, I got off on the Russia tangent, and I'm like, I'm not going to Russia either.
1821. Is it the magical number and age?
Again, I would go back to the science and the still lack of science around the effect of the compounds on the developing brain. And I really want to know more about that. I certainly, don't encourage my adolescent to use cannabis. I know my young adult children use cannabis and they're, in their mid-20s. So I think it's a different story, but I would like to have more science as a parent before I, said it's okay to teach a, 18-year-old or 16-year-old about responsible use of cannabis at that age. I don't think we know enough. I'm not, I don't have no Pollyanna, like the kids aren't doing it. But I think we need to push for more science on this question.
Yeah. All right. Chef Nikki and Kim, can you guys stick around, or do you have another important engagement to go to? Because you're good. Kim, can you hang out?
Give me a sec.
Oh, because she's a CEO of a major corporation. So I'm guessing she has a very tight schedule. And she was so nice to come on short notice today. Yeah. What's that?
I'm good for a bit. Yes.
Awesome. And by the way, if you have to bail, just bail. Okay. No worries. All right. We're going to take a break and we're going to bring in Dr. David Kunick next. He's I could call him a friend and somewhat of a regular on Green Rush Live and in Pro Cannabis and on Pro Cannabis Media. We'll be back after this break. Don't go away.
Hey,
You want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information.
Hi, my name's Tai Chang. I'm the president and founder of Aloha Green Apothecary in Hawaii. We're a vertically integrated medical cannabis company with 3 dispensaries, 1 extraction lab, and 1 cultivation center near the North Shore of Oahu. We have over 150 employees now, and we've been working with Adaptive HR to meet our human resource needs. We're super excited to work with them as we expand, and we've grown at least 2-3 times over the last 2 years. So we look forward to a good relationship with Adaptive, and come visit us in Hawaii anytime. Aloha.
Hi, my name is Janice O'Reilly. I'm a partner with AAF CPAs, a national CPA firm that specializes in cannabis. We're based out of Boston. We have been working with Adaptive HR for several years and have recommended them to our clients, who have all been extremely happy with their service and their responsiveness.
Calling All Growers with Liz Grow is supported by the Grow Kit from stylelighting.shop, Adaptive HR, built for your cannabis business, Revolutionary Clinics, where the patient comes first, by Accounting Buds, your accountant in cannabis, and by Salient Video Surveillance Systems for today and tomorrow's security.
You would think that it is. However, there's quite a bit of debate right now in the accounting industry when it relates to cannabis with this exact question. I'm part of a few different networking groups that are solely accountants for cannabis companies. And there's been quite a bit of back and forth in those communities and discussion regarding whether 280E, if it went away, if the administration legalized cannabis or took it off of Schedule 1, what would happen? And it could go either way right now. The debate is it can make the accountant's life much easier. That's what a lot of the inexperienced accountants are saying right now, it seems, whereas the accountants that have been in this industry for a while and have gone through the same thing that happened with hemp a few years ago are saying that it will make lives more difficult, because when hemp became declassified a while back, the accounting became more complicated.
All right, welcome back to the final half hour of another Friday afternoon edition of Green Rush Live. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. I'm joined by Josh Kincaid, who's a regular contributor to our weekly news show that is live streamed right after this live program at 6 o'clock-ish. And Josh is our Washington state correspondent. We have about 10 other state correspondents now, including one from Europe. And I'm really proud of the fact that people like Josh are willing to give however long it takes you, Josh, to put your report together every week. I know some it takes hours, and others it doesn't take more than 90 seconds. So I appreciate the effort that you put in, and you've been an added addition to our coast-to-coast effort here on Pro Cannabis Media. So I'm on record of saying thank you.
Yeah, happy to be on, man. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. And we welcome in a guy who's been on with us in the past, someone I have a lot of respect for and enjoy his company, both socially and taking one of his seminars, which I took at the New England Cannabis Convention this past fall. got me out of bed on a Saturday at about 8 a.m. And I got into Boston in time to make it to the seminar. And I still say that was an invigorating experience. David Kunick from UCS Advisors. David, great to see you again.
Thanks for having me today, Jimmy. Appreciate it. And so it was great to be on. And yes, the seminar, you were there. And the fact that you stayed the entire time means we're doing something right.
Yeah, no, I thought it was entertaining. You kept it moving. It was a dog and pony show with you and Chris. I'll be perfectly honest, but you have to be somewhat of an entertainer when you have a live audience, if you will, of people in front of you, right?
Exactly. Well said.
All right. So you are a doctor of physical therapy, if I remember correctly, right?
Yep, and a doctor of also healthcare management as well too.
I have a prescription in my pocket. I just want you to know I'm going to find a physical therapist now to take care of this aging body of mine, but we don't want to get into that. I want to continue to talk about cannabis. We have Kim Real from Azuka and Chef Nikki Escoto. I got it right. With us as well. But David, I want to get your impressions about where we are at now with the end of prohibition movement that continues to evolve here in the United States. You're in New Jersey, if I remember correctly, right?
I have offices in New Jersey and also Portland, Maine. And I used to have one in Las Vegas as well too.
That's right.
And I had cannabis companies in Oregon, Colorado, Nevada, Michigan, and also Maine.
All right. So the question I'm going to ask you right off the bat, New York is now moving towards an adult use market. You know, there's ridiculous amounts of predictions for the New York market, perhaps equaling the California market in 5 years. Has the New York law that they voted in and are starting to do regulations, did they get it right in that state?
So ironically, I was in New York City last night, and there was more cannabis shops popping up and more people walking the streets saying, "Hey, I have the best weed here. Buy my weed. You want a joint? You want this? You want that?" And ironically, the people that parked the car behind me bought some cannabis and started rolling right in their car. And I started laughing, and they're like, "What's so funny?" And I'm like, "Because how long did it take for this to happen?" But to answer your question directly, it's really too soon to tell. And I know it sounds like a very political answer, but if we look at New York, New Jersey, it's such a conundrum and how they're still trying to actually figure out the rules and regulations. And the one state I like to use a lot is Michigan, because Michigan had the most amount of medical patients. So they had a good system in place. So when it went recreational, they had a lot of the rules and regulations in place. New York State doesn't have that much of have a bunch of medical patients, nor did New Jersey really. So you're still figuring out the rules and regulations, and you're still figuring out, how to keep the rec program separate from the medical program. I've gone on numerous shows, and Jimmy, you've heard me say this before. I personally think all 50 states should get medical cannabis. Then we can worry about the recreational. But when going back and forth, that's where you have a big mix on how to use this medicine, how to implement it, and really figure out the rules and regs. So, it's going to be very, very interesting overall to see how this rolls out. I think we're going to have numerous delays in New York, just like in New Jersey or like any other state. So,
Kim, you're in New Mexico. Can you walk me through, how it evolved there? I know somewhat what happened there. Was it legislature or a ballot question?
So it was legislative. So New Mexico passed a medical program in 2008, a Compassionate Care Act, and has had a pretty robust medical program in place since then. And then last year, in 2021, the legislature passed adult use in a special session called by our governor. And adult use comes online April 1st. So New Mexico had a fairly robust medical system in place, and then a very aggressive regulation writing process for adult use to be able to come online so quickly. So adult use will come online in New Mexico April 1st. There is a scramble, but I think the state is as ready as any state that makes that transition is. I think it's going to be great. And, in New York, I'll add to your comments on the New York legislation, because we have, we're kind of New York and New Mexico based. And it was interesting to me that those are our two operating headquarters. And New York and New Mexico adopted adult use a day away from each other first quarter of last year, which is, I always personally took credit for that. But I think the one thing that I would say about the New York legislation that I think they really did get right was the emphasis on social equity and social justice. And in particular, what I like about the New York statute, the rules, the regs aren't all written yet, obviously, but the way they are forcing a flat industry in New York adult use, meaning like for their social consumption, their social consumption statute requires that one licensee can have no more than 3 licenses. So meaning you're not going to have like a Starbucks of social consumption in New York, right? You're going to have smaller entrepreneurs. I think it's going to really unleash a lot of creativity at the social consumption level. So I think a lot of the ways they wrote that legislation to flatten the industry and give smaller entrepreneurs an opportunity to get into this space. I think you probably all saw the announcement that came out last night on New York about the preference for licensees who have a past criminal conviction. Like
right.
that this is some pretty groundbreaking news for the industry. So lots of interesting stuff going on.
It is, Kim. And I just want to add though, and maybe I'm a little jaded being in this industry for over a decade. Yeah. On paper, I agree. But I've seen too many other states and too many other companies figure out workarounds and people trying to hustle the system. Yeah. So in theory, Kim, you're spot on. And maybe I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer here, but let's see really how it's implemented and really what happens. Because the other thing is too, like, let's look at Connecticut. Connecticut, I believe for their social equity, it's $3 million for the license. The largest ever in the US for a social equity license. Like that's mind blowing.
Right.
So that's where I think it's gonna be kind of interesting to see what happens overall, but you make some great points, Kim.
Yeah.
Let me ask him one more question about New Mexico. Did they automatically give adult use licenses to the medical dispensaries like Arizona did to open the market, or are they getting separate applications and trying to separate the two entities?
There will be both. So,
okay.
I think similar, I think Massachusetts did something similar where like legacy medical providers could also have adult use, but there was a requirement where there was a percentage of inventory that had to be reserved for people with a medical card to ensure that patients had access to medicine. And I think some of those things are really important.
Yeah, and totally. And people do forget that this really is a medicinal product. It interacts with your endocannabinoid system that's inside every mammal, and it affects everybody differently. I think I don't know if it was one of you guys, we talked about sativa versus indica. That's now being debunked, right? Because it isn't about sativa or indica as much as it is about the terpenes that steer the cannabinoids. Am I accurate there? David, you're going, yeah.
It's a fair assumption to say.
Yeah. Chef Nikki, you find that out too?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely different profiles have different effects towards them. And, just like any other smell for people, like if you're into a certain smell, usually if a strain smells that way, that's usually the one for you as well.
To me, it all smells good. I'm sorry. I'm not very discerning. What can I tell you guys? I have it, and that's one of the reasons why I'm leaving my body to science. I don't know when that's going to happen, but I'm going to list all the things I took over 40, 50 years of usage and share that with the science community. And I have no problem if they want to dissect me like I did that frog in 10th grade. Josh, what's going on in Washington State? You guys have had the reputation of being one of the early adapters to legal cannabis. And yet I hear things about the state that they're not really, it's not as fair as I thought it would be at this point in time of their maturity.
Two things I think that are keeping investors out of the Washington State market is the limited ability for ownership. You can only have 10%. It's capped. And then it's anything over that requires you to have residency. So you need to live here for 6 months in order to own anything more than that. So that obviously right off the bat is going to be a huge deterrent for people. And then not being vertically integrated. So you have to either pick, are you going to do retail or are you going to grow and or have a brand? And, like Dr. David mentioned, being jaded in the industry happens when you've been in it too long, or you have the experience that we do, seeing folks that have first mover advantages in Washington state that have a heart, the license, they sold that to an Arizona based company, an MSO, Harvest Health, maybe. Mm-hmm. So whoever they sold it to, they took the money, they went to California, they bought, they worked in partnership with a social equity applicant. They ended up going to a business partner of the social equity applicant, paid them off, got the license, and then sold it. Very, very shady. And the person holding the license had no idea that his business partner sold it right out from underneath him. So it does kind of bring up some questions about, like, where is that investment focus, knowing that there's limited license states? Because just like New Mexico being legislative, it's not hippies on the street saying, hey, let's sign this because we want it. It's saying, no, legislators, the bureaucrats are getting the message from lobbyists saying, make this a limited license state so that we have a lot of opportunities to make a lot of money. And that's where a lot of investment focus is coming at. So Dr. David, you're going to be at a couple events coming up. You're going to be at MJ Impact in the fall in New York. Yep. If you're going to Northeast Can. Why are you going to those events, and where is the investment focus? Are we seeing grows or brands or retail, or is it delivery?
And before I answer that question, something else that I've seen contracts where someone is a minority, they are trying to get a minority license, but once they get it, they have to turn over and switch the equity position within 90 days. I've seen contracts with subsidiary contracts to the side. I mean, there's a lot of shady, not very kosher stuff going on. But to answer your question, so this year, right now, I am personally scheduled to attend, I want to say it's 16 cannabis conferences this year, not networking events, just conferences. So the reason why I go to NECANN Boston is one, just New England is at its infancy stage compared to the West Coast. And if you take the surface area of New England, it's roughly half the surface area of the entire West Coast, but twice the population. Mm-hmm. And people forget Maine is the second state to get medical marijuana back in 1999. So there's a lot of rules and regulations that Maine has really fought to get, which you see a lot of other states starting to do. So in terms of those different that conference, really attending to do our seminar that we're actually doing on Saturday, how to raise your social capital to raise capital, but also to actually meet some clients, some new investors, and really what we're seeing investors putting their money towards. A lot of individuals, their sweet spots under 250,000. That's a lot of individual investor sweet spot where they say, okay, we can kind of wait 3 to 4 years for a potential return on investments. People that are raising, right, as you say, more than about $5 million, you're really going more so family offices, venture capitalists, maybe some high net worth individuals. And we're really seeing for the investors now is, what is your management team, first off? And the second thing is, what's your 3-year plan, 4-year plan, more than just one facility? And we're seeing a big divide in investors right now. I don't pick on New York and New Jersey. Once again, I attended a couple of networking events last night in New York City. I was the only cannabis guy there, which is great. And there are some people there that I met. They're like, hey, listen, this is how much money I have to invest. I don't care. Find me a deal somewhere in the country. Versus other people, which is, no, rah New York, I will only do a business in New York, and that's it. So if you're an investor and someone's rah about their only state and the upside is capped and limited, well, it's a little bit harder to get that investment money. We're not seeing so much in grows or dispensaries as much unless you have a plan to have multiple locations within a set period of time. Then investors are happy with that. We're seeing a lot of ancillary services right now. And especially people that have ancillary services have patents, or patents are pending on technology or maybe a product. Investors are really liking that. And that's what we're seeing right now in the investment community in cannabis out here on the East Coast.
How do they feel about media companies? Anyway, hey, Kim, I want to get back to you. What David just described, is that your experience? You've got a privately held investor-backed company. How many years have you been doing in this business?
Yeah, so we raised our seed round in 2018, and we did our first license launch in later that year, 2018, in Massachusetts. So we've been, around doing this for 4 years ish. And we are a technology-focused, innovation-focused company. So we're all about creating and licensing our intellectual property. So send them our way. We're actually not raising money right now. We're just growing on our own steam. So we're
which is great. And kudos, Kim. And one of the biggest things we tell our clients here at UCS Advisors is, how much money do you need? And then how much do you need, like in what tranches? And what do you need within 60 days, within 6 months, within 9 months? Because a lot of people don't think that far ahead. And I see you shaking your head because you're like, yeah, because that happens all the time.
So I'm shaking my head. I'm a recovering venture capitalist. So I spent most of my career investing in high-tech startup companies, and then sort of, ended up in the cannabis world. And that's just, mind blowing as with my investor hat on. So.
Right.
And someone like Kim with your background, and this goes back to Josh's question, and this is kind of what we do. We kind of help tell the story backed by objective data. And with Kim's background doing venture capital, that puts her above so many other competitors looking to raise capital, because she has the experience of actually deploying it, make sure it's utilized properly, seeing what the potential returns are. So she can really think about her investors ahead of time. So, kudos to you. I mean, that's a huge plus on your end. That's a great example of, having a great management team already in place for a company.
I'm learning by doing, let's just say here. Okay. I listen to you, David. I want to follow everything you say. And then reality strikes. And it's so tough to run a company and raise money for a company at the same time, isn't it?
Yes, it is. As someone that has started over 10 companies, and I've raised money for 12 of them, actually 13 of my own companies. Yeah. It's difficult, but it's also about having the right people in place. It's also, as I tell people, do the work the first time. Yes, it might be a pain in the butt to do your pro forma, your deck or whatever, but you're going to have that for the next 6 months, roughly. So once you do it right, and like, I'm going to use Kim as an example. She's not raising money right now, but let's say she's like, hey, I need to raise $2 million. She can go back to what she did several years ago and use that as a reference point and a jumping point. And this is where, in part, we tell in our lecture, there's a difference between lending and fundraising. Lending is just give me money and I'm lazy. Like here's my bank statements. Here's my vision. Do you want to give me money? Yes or no? Fundraising is like networking. It takes constant work. And literally this is where a lot of times people out there will reach out to someone like us at UCS Advisors as investor relations experts to literally hire us to help them and guide them so they don't waste their time on fundraising. Because if you raise your money properly, you can only, if you really want to, it's only going to take a couple hours a week once you're organized and you have it set up. But if you don't, it can seem like you're constantly doing both.
Why would they reach out to you? A lot of people don't know what investor relations is. Is it an investment banker? Is it public relations specialist? Can you explain?
Sure. So most people can go to like a broker dealer. That's not what we are. We are investor relation experts. So in other words, we are investor relations advisors. So for publicly traded companies, we tend to work with the board of directors. We work with them to work on their short-term and long-term goals. For a company that's just starting out, trying to raise money, the best analogy is this, Josh. All of us here, I assume, have seen Shark Tank, right? Yeah. We're the ones that work with you before you get on Shark Tank to work on your pitch, to work on how to talk to investors, to use the positive power of negative preparation so you know the gist of actually how to answer a potential investor's question. And that's where an investor relations expert comes in. And you don't need to hire someone full time. We do our stuff by the hour, and we offer a refund within 6 months if you're not happy with us. Because for us, it's about building that long lasting relationship. But this is where I tell people, your lawyer will hire someone like us and then upcharge you what they're paying us. Your business coach goes out and hires someone like us and then upcharge you to talk to us. So as I kind of tell people, you have your lawyer, you have your accountant, maybe you have your business coach. If you need to raise money, do fundraising, then you might want to get an investor relations expert to assist you with that. So, and here's a great example, Jimmy. And I used this last night in New York. Someone needed money and they were pitching me. It was a real estate deal. And I was like, great. The guy's like, I don't need an investor relations expert. I got my pitch down, everything. I go, fine. I'm going to ask you one question right now because you have your pitch down. He's like, what is it? I go, tell me 3 objective points about your business that makes you different than your competitors. Huh? Oh, I can't do that. Oh, I got to go back and look at my notes. I'm like, so you're not prepared. I'm like, you just lost money right now. You just lost an opportunity of all the investors I represent because you're that sure. So, and that's where, once again, investor relations expert helps prepare you ahead of time So anyone you talk to at any networking event like Jimmy at NECAN Boston, so you can be prepared to talk to people, say, oh, great, I'm looking to invest in opportunities. I'm an opportunity myself. So
I tell you, I love listening to you, David. I really do, because it's like, okay, I can do that. I haven't done that. And I just go down that list. But first of all, we're up against the top of the hour. David, tell us where people, if they want to take your seminar, here's the floor. Tell them how to get involved, get on the NECAN site and all that.
Sure. So it's actually next Saturday, March 19th at 9 a.m. If you go to NECAN.com, click on the Boston venue, and you'll see the workshops, how to raise your social capital, to raise capital, or NECAN Next Level is our website that takes you right to the page. Everyone's asking, will we be done before Steve D'Angelo is a keynote speaker on Saturday at 12 p.m.? And the answer is yes. So you can come take our seminar, still make the keynote speaker. If you want to learn more about me, David Kunick, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. At the end of my profile, it says willing to achieve greatness. Just email me that message, and I know you read the profile and you're being serious. It's also a good way too to make sure someone's not spamming you the email either. Our website, ucsadvisor.com, and we just launched a 5-minute quiz to see if you're ready to actually pitch to investors. And if you can answer these 12 questions in 6 minutes or less with confidence, you're ready to pitch. If you can't, there's a good chance you need some help.
That sounds like a challenge. I got to go do that now.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
I'm being full disclosure though, Kim. The website designer did not make the questions super dark, so in the process of fixing that as we speak. But yeah, I tell people do that quiz. It's 6 minutes, and people that have pitched are like, oh, 6 minutes, that's easy. People have not pitched like, oh my God, I can't do all this in 6 minutes. Like, well, you need to tweak things, Ed.
I can do a lot of things in 6 minutes. Kim, how do people find out about Azuka? And go ahead, name a few dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, because we do have some followers here.
Yeah, azukatime.com is our website, and you can sort of click in and get in touch with all of us. Let's see, some of our partners in Massachusetts are Temple Hill and Revolutionary Clinics. So there's some great folks out there.
My original sponsor of my podcast from March of 2018, the Rev Clinics group. So Keith Cooper is awesome. And I think you know everybody else there too. And by the way, a get well wish for Tom Schneider, who's really their COO, Chief Marketing Officer. He did his vaccinations. He did his booster. He stayed away from people, and he still got COVID this week. Okay. So while we all sit here and say, it's over, I'd like to think it's over, but you could still get it. So just be careful out there. Chef Nikki, how do they find you?
So my website, KITHCEN.co, not .com. You can find out a bunch of information there. Also on my LinkedIn profile, Nicholas Escoto. Also on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. And I'm doing a event on April 2nd and infused invite only. If you want to find out any ways to get on that list, just DM me on any of the social platforms. And I'm looking to do a little bit of something that I call a hot box, which is utilizing other brands to kind of use either their non-infused formulations and different formulations to be involved in a box that consumers can enjoy with a 3-course meal that they can do at their own home for holidays and such.
Fantastic. Yeah. And you know what? I love the fact that all three of you're on my book of life, okay? Because you didn't know you were going to do this at the beginning of today. And I so appreciate you making the time and making yourselves available. Josh Kincaid, The Talking Hedge, where can people find you?
TheTalkingHedge.com. We're on a podcast everywhere, so just look at The Talking Hedge.
There you go. So for everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media, a reminder, our new show is coming up next on our network of social media platforms. So remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there, people. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Coming up on We Talk News this week, WNBA superstar and Olympic champion Brittany Griner gets busted at a Russian airport for carrying hash oil. Retiring Colorado Congressman Ed Perlmutter vows to pester his Senate comrades until safe banking for cannabis gets passed. Plus, a new poll by the American Bankers Association gets 68% support. Plus, Costa Rica, France, and Thailand decriminalize cannabis while the USA cause gets ignored in the State of the Union address. All that and more on Weed Talk News next. Pro Cannabis Media original content is supported by Salient Systems, your trusted name in video surveillance for the cannabis industry, and by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Accounting Buds, CPA services for the cannabis industry, and by stylighting.shop. Log on today to get your grow kit.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Weed Talk News. I'm Elena Pinto reporting for Pro Cannabis Media. Our top story this week, once again, comes from Russia, as all eyes are fixed upon the ongoing war with Ukraine. Some U.S. officials are now trying to make it a priority to bring Brittany Griner home. Griner is a 7-time WNBA champion, a 2-time Olympic medalist, and now a Russian prisoner. A few days ago, Russian state media released video of Griner being detained at an airport for allegedly carrying vape cartridges with hashish oil inside. We're now learning the incident actually happened weeks ago, and Griner has been in Russian custody ever since. She could ultimately be charged with large-scale transportation of drugs, an offense that could put her behind bars in Russia for up to 10 years. U.S. diplomats are working to bring Griner home, but they say it will not be easy. Seems uncanny to be locking someone up for a vape cartridge while a war ensues. But we send our best to Brittany Griner and hope she can make it home safely with the help of officials stateside. However, it doesn't seem President Biden will be the one to pipe up and save the day. In a not-so-shocking turn of events, cannabis was completely absent from the president's State of the Union address. The items that did make the top of the list included infrastructure, opioid abuse, and veteran care. Ironically, all things that could be aided by legalizing and regulating cannabis. Go figure. Despite that, efforts to protect the plant and the dollar surrounding it are still going strong. A new poll from the American Bankers Association shows 68% of Americans want Congress to pass some form of legislation that protects banks that work with cannabis companies. But lawmakers on Capitol Hill still don't seem to be interested. Congress just filed a new spending bill this week, and language to protect banks is nowhere to be found, after we just battled 6 times to have the Safe Banking Act heard on the Hill. Co-sponsor of that bill, Colorado Rep. Ed Perlmutter, says he plans to pester members of Congress about adding that language until it's done. However, many cannabis advocates are saying they need Perlmutter to be more than a pest and actually get this legislation passed once and for all. Vote Pro Podcast's Phil Adams has more on what's happening in the nation's capital this week. Phil.
Hi, I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast, and this is the Weed Talk News DC Report. An omnibus spending bill was introduced in Congress this week that once again includes a ban on recreational cannabis sales in DC. The provision, known as the Harris Rider, prevents the District of Columbia from using local tax dollars to set up a legal cannabis market. A number of cannabis advocates and lawmakers have expressed their disappointment. In a press release, Toy Hutchinson, president and CEO of the Marijuana Policy Project, said, quote, "Entrepreneurs who live in this minority-majority community are denied the ability to open businesses that are available in every other legal cannabis jurisdiction." Although DC legalized possession and home cultivation back in 2014, that same year, Representative Andy Harris of Maryland sponsored the rider, which passed as part of that year's spending bill. The Harris Rider has been renewed every year since then. Legislation is now pending that would allow Veterans Administration doctors and patients to talk openly about medical cannabis. The proposal, sponsored by Representative Seth Moulton of Massachusetts, protects veterans who participate in state legal medical cannabis programs from losing their eligibility for VA healthcare services. VA doctors would be required to honor the desires of their patients who seek alternative forms of treatment, including cannabis. They would also be authorized to discuss medical marijuana treatment options with patients. Representative Ed Perlmutter of Colorado appears willing to discuss his Secure and Fair Enforcement Banking Act with anyone in Congress who will listen, and to attach the safe banking language to any bill being considered. In February, he was able to get the language inserted into the large-scale America Competes Act, which now awaits a final vote. Last year, Perlmutter attempted to attach the language into the National Defense Authorization Act, though it was later stripped from the bill. Back in 2020, Perlmutter was able to get the language attached to 2 of the House-passed COVID relief packages, though it didn't make it into either final version. Perlmutter told the House Rules Committee point blank he intends to offer the safe banking provision as an amendment to, quote, every single bill I possibly can until it's passed. That's the Weed Talk News DC report for this week. I'm Phil Adams from Vote Pro Podcast.
There is good news this week as other countries around the globe make moves with marijuana. Costa Rica has legalized medical marijuana across the country, and France is also tiptoeing into the medical industry. The country's government issued a decree last month that authorizes cultivation of medical cannabis, and now they're working on developing the full industry. And in Thailand, health officials seem hopeful that the legalization of cannabis will help the country's tourism market flourish once again. Now let's get a check on what's happening in Europe this week. Here's Stephen Arthur George.
I'm Stephen Arthur George with SAG Advisory Services in Lisbon, Portugal. This is the European Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. France is having a bit of FOMO when it comes to medical cannabis. As of March 1st, a new decree law entered into force for medical cannabis regulations. That being said, the regulators still need to implement it locally. But France will allow the cultivation, production, manufacture, transport, and import-export of medical cannabis. Over across the pond in Canada, 2 Canadian companies receive European GMP certification. Pure Sun Farms and Zeus receive EU GMP from Germany and Portugal regulators, respectively. This will allow both companies to export to Europe as well as other global markets. On the other hand, Canadian producers will start to face increased competition as more cultivators, producers, and manufacturers come online here in Europe. Over in the Netherlands, Zebra is on track to deliver the first harvest to the Dutch government. The Canadian-based company was awarded one of the 5 licenses in the Netherlands. They are growing 1 high THC flower as well as another 1-to-1 THC and CBD flower. As soon as the harvest is complete, they will submit samples to the Dutch government for further analysis. That's the European Cannabis Report. I'm Stephen Arthur George from SAG Advisory Services for Read Talk News.
Back in the U.S., one state may have found a loophole when it comes to cannabis transactions. Dreamer Cannabis, a dispensary in Southampton, Massachusetts, is moving away from all cash operations and letting people buy cannabis with their credit card. The shop has started using a third-party platform that allows customers to enter their credit card information via a smartphone app. And apparently, it's allowing Dreamer Cannabis to operate without fear of federal interference with their money. Ron Marshalsea has more from the Bay State in this week's Massachusetts Report.
I'm Ron Marshalsea with the Massachusetts Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Dreamer Cannabis in Southampton, an adult-use cannabis dispensary in Massachusetts, is moving away from all cash operations. They have begun using a third-party platform that allows customers to buy state-legal cannabis products via credit cards. This is a workaround of policies in place by most banks and major credit card agencies that ban transactions on cannabis, which remains federally illegal. Most state legal cannabis dispensaries only accept cash or debit. MariMed, a leading multi-state cannabis operator, announced it signed a definitive agreement to acquire a provisional dispensary license from Greenhouse Naturals. The transaction will add a second retail location to MariMed's cannabis operations in Massachusetts. Bob Fireman, Chief Executive Officer of MariMed, was quoted as saying, "Adding a second adult-use dispensary in Massachusetts is a key element of our long-term strategic growth plan, continuing our efforts to expand deeper in high-growth states in which we already operate. We expect the Beverly location to be a particularly strong performer in our growing footprint. We anticipate it will contribute this year to our revenue and adjusted EBITDA growth." MariMed also anticipates the Beverly adult-use dispensary will be operational during the second half of 2022. And finally, a third recreational dispensary could be coming to Rockland. The Rockland Board of Selectmen has authorized a host community agreement that will allow a marijuana store to open at 1015 Hingham Street. This new store will join Canavana and Health Circle in serving cannabis to the people in and around Rockland. That's this week's Massachusetts Cannabis Report. For Weed Talk News, I'm Ron Marshalsea.
Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.
A battle brewing between MSOs, MedMen, and Ascend Wellness are locked in a litigious back and forth. Under a deal announced last year, Ascend would acquire a nearly 87% interest in MedMen's New York cannabis business, with an option to acquire the remainder after the launch of the adult use market. But Ascend has since filed a lawsuit claiming MedMen materially breached the deal, and Ascend CEO addressed shareholders about it this week. Deborah Borchardt has the details in this week's Green Market Report.
This is the business update for Weed Talk News from the Green Market Report. Okay, not a lot of great news in the business world this week for cannabis. Green Lane said it was selling its headquarters and laying off employees and making leadership changes in order for the company to become profitable. Now, having said that, they did say they expect net sales to be between $55 million and $56 million for the fourth quarter, and between roughly $165 million and $166 million for the full year. Ascend Wellness reported that its fourth quarter revenue decreased 6.2% sequentially to $88 million. Now, that sequential decline was driven by lower prices in the wholesale market. However, on a good note, the full year revenue rose 133% to $332 million. And finally, the Scotts Miracle-Gro Company lowered its full year sales guidance for its hydroponic hawthorn division. In addition, Scott said that the reduction would likely lead to adjusted earnings per share that are lower than previously expected. Scott expects that the hawthorn sales could decline 15 to 25%, and that's including acquisitions. And that's it for this week. I'm Deborah Borchardt for the Green Market Report for Weed Talk News.
Also on the East Coast, the idea of gifting weed may be going up in smoke for people in Connecticut. A new House bill introduced this week would outlaw gifting cannabis in any scenario where a donation is made and would prohibit any transfers of cannabis outside of a licensed retailer. It would also nix companies' abilities to advertise on billboards. And the budding legal markets in the Mid-Atlantic region are causing some workers to reach out for more resources. New reports show cannabis employees in New Jersey and Maryland are beginning to reach out for union representation within the industry. With more from the East Coast, Claudia Post has this week's Pennsylvania report.
I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'm here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, reporting for Weed Talk News. Pennsylvania Democratic gubernatorial candidate Josh Shapiro is running on a pro-cannabis ticket. Naturally, he blames the Republicans for stalling and says the only thing they're interested in is their own self-interest and their wealthy constituents. Who would have thought? A York County-based company called Groff North America last month said it became the first such business in the country to bring a cannabis crop to market for scientific study. That's an amazing thing because previously, since 1968, researchers were restricted to only purchasing from the University of Mississippi. What a ridiculous thing. Originally a hemp company, the Pennsylvania firm was one of just 4 companies nationally to win approval from the DEA to sell their product for medical and scientific purposes. For the first time, real world marijuana will be available to researchers throughout the country, and that is a really cool thing. Pennsylvania is expanding areas of its medical cannabis program to help advance research and decrease costs for patients. Currently, they have to pay a doctor, they have to pay for the privilege of getting a card, and for our citizens in more challenged communities, that's just, drives people to the street. So this is a great thing. The Department of Health is making financial assistance more widely available for patients and has also announced there will be a 9th clinical registrant here in Pennsylvania for the medical marijuana research program. Our program will eliminate annual fees, eliminate all background checks for eligible caregivers, and distribute funding to each patient in the financial hardship program. Well, that's a wrap for this week from Pennsylvania. I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'll be back next week to talk about what's hot and what's not in Pennsylvania. From Weed Talk News, have a fabulous week.
Moving to the Midwest now, and people in the Show Me State want lawmakers to show them the weed. In Missouri, the Cannabis Freedom Act to legalize adult use is set to appear on this November's ballot. But this week, advocates took to the state capitol demanding lawmakers take action sooner than that. Brandon Jones has much more in this week's Missouri Report.
Hey everybody, it's Brandon Jones here again from Distribution Maven with Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And yeah, it's been a very big week here in Missouri. Down at Jefferson City, the state capitol, they actually let people speak on both positive and the negative for the Cannabis Freedom Act here. It's going to go on the ballot, like they said here this next month. So the big things about this act is it would have recreational use allowed throughout the state starting January of 2023. And then the second thing is anybody can actually have a dispensary in the state that has just filed their taxes here in the state of Missouri, just like any other business. They wouldn't have to go through the big licensing loops that there are now to figure out how you can actually get a license. So my good buddy Brennan England for Minorities for Medical Marijuana spoke and said that this was a big thing to allow access to minorities versus having to have, a big bankroll and having to have all this legislation and help from, a legal team to get actual access to have a dispensary here in the state. Another big thing is they're going to have an actual rally on the 29th at the state to bring more access and more awareness to what's actually going on here and see if we can get more people involved. And there is still 2 more weeks you can actually reach out to your lawmakers and let them know how you feel about this act. So please do. I'm Brandon Jones from Distribution Maven, the Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Thanks a lot, everybody, and have a great week.
In Washington state, regulators will finally start requiring pesticide testing on all adult use cannabis products, a standard most legal programs already have. Washington state does already test medical marijuana for pesticides, and now those same standards will be applied to everyone's weed.
I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Washingtonians are seeking to remove restrictive requirements for non-resident cannabis investors. State law currently requires all cannabis investors to have established residency in Washington state for at least 6 months. As a result, local companies are undercapitalized and without funding will largely be left out of the national market when legalization occurs. During the past several years, measurements have been introduced to remove the residency requirement, but so far, they've all failed to advance. Similar stagnant cannabis-related bills signal that the legislators' reluctance to act without federal guidance and assurances. Overturning general residency requirements will usher in a new era of expansion for multi-state operators, as well as offer an exit strategy for those business owners who have benefited from the period of protectionism, yet are too tired to compete for local market share against the budgets of behemoth MSOs. Next week, you guys are going to find out about Washington State's Cannabis Research Commission, but with that, we're going to have to roll up this Washington State Cannabis Report. I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Heads, reporting for Weed Talk News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out.
Thank you, Elena. It's time for the Florida Report from Weed Talk News, and I'm Heather Allman from Cannabis Law Report. During COVID until June 2021, Existing medical cannabis patients were allowed to renew their medical certifications remotely via emergency order. But the hope that these telehealth consultations would be permanent went up in smoke last week. Joint legislation SB 164 and HB 333 by Senator Jeff Brandes and Representative J.R. Williamson proposed that while patients would still have to receive an in-person consultation before receiving their initial cannabis certification, they could continue meeting with their physician remotely via video chat, phone, text, or email. Unfortunately for those seeking that easier route to cannabis relief, the 2022 session was quite the buzzkill to those plans. And with cannabis-friendly Brandes reaching term limits later this year, we'll have to see who takes up that cause moving forward. And while we're talking about the legislation, Florida lawmakers keep chipping away at the ballot or citizens' initiative process. It has often been employed on issues the legislature refused to pass. Let me tell you, Floridians from all walks of life have been able to use their constitutional right to direct democracy in Florida and to improve the state for the better. Unfortunately for us, the legislature disagrees. With a week to go in the 2022 session, Florida lawmakers are considering a series of measures to push the Republican leaders' years-long battle to make it harder for groups to change the state constitution, although they don't seem to have a problem doing so themselves. For more than a decade, the ballot initiative process has been utilized to legalize medical marijuana, increase the minimum wage, and limit the expansion of gambling in the state. Yet lawmakers have consistently made efforts to block measures from going before voters and amending the Constitution. So far, our GOP-controlled legislature has increased the number of signatures required on initiatives to be placed on a ballot. They have banned sponsors from paying petition gatherers by the signature, a move that experts say has dramatically driven the cost of amendment drives up. And next, they shrank the length of time signatures are valid from 4 years to only 2 years, meaning the signatures can only be used for one election cycle, again, driving up costs. For the trifecta, the legislature tucked a separate law into a sweeping Senate elections package affecting the Florida Supreme Court reviews of proposed amendments. This is supposedly ensuring that proposal wording meets legal standards before being presented to voters. Currently, we have SB 524 that would require the Attorney General to withdraw requests for court reviews if proposals don't submit enough signatures to qualify for the ballot before that February 1st deadline. All of these are in the state's effort to restrict ballot and citizen initiatives. The ACLU of Florida says they are opposing all of these constitutional changes, labeling them death by 1,000 cuts. Let's hope the next legislative session sees more positive change for Floridians than it has this year. In other news, in case you haven't heard, the Emerald Cup launched a new cannabis classification system for the 2022 awards. The revolution underway at the Emerald Cup regards how they will assess excellence in cannabis, and with it comes a new system that will universally classify cannabis based on terpenes, flavor, and effects. The days of simply seeking out the highest THC total is rapidly fading as science has converged and finally proven that terpenes are at the root of the entourage effect customers are seeking. However, terpenes with their unfamiliar names and mysterious effects have mostly added another layer of consumer confusion to an already complicated, overly broad indica sativa hybrid simplification, whimsical strain names, and irrelevant THC percentages. The new Emerald Cup terpene-based classification can be easily used by consumers, bud tenders, dispensaries, judges, and growers, and will eventually trickle down to impact dispensary menus across the country. In preparation, the Medical Marijuana Treatment Clinics of Florida sponsored an informative educational webinar on Wednesday, March 9th called Focus on Terpenes. The series host, Mark Matoza, was joined by guest speaker Nick Manginski from Move by Verano, and participants learned about the terpenes found in cannabis and in the natural world, but more importantly, they found out how the right terpenes can match a condition and can increase the efficacy of medical cannabis products. Let's hope the new terpene chart can help. That's a wrap for the We Talk News Florida Report. I'm Heather Allman from Cannabis Law Report. Have a great week ahead.
And finally, is it time for cannabis companies to throw in the towel when it comes to advertising on Instagram? No secret that Instagram doesn't love cannabis content. Unless you're a multi-million-dollar company, you can almost guarantee the algorithm will shadow ban you in some way if you share content relating to cannabis. So streaming service Twitch is looking to take over. A recent report dove into the potential the platform has for cannabis marketing. With no algorithm and no interference with those following local laws, Twitch is pretty much the perfect place to push your pot products. From gamers who interact with their audience on a personal level to the possibility for product giveaways and reveals. If you've struggled with social media marketing lately, you might want to befriend a streamer and turn your sites to Twitch. After all, it's a whole new world of weed out there, so use it wisely and to your best advantage. That does it for Weed Talk News this week. I'm Elena Pinto for Pro Cannabis Media. See you next time.
Hi, my name's Tai Chang. I'm the president and founder of Aloha Green Apothecary in Hawaii. We're a vertically integrated medical cannabis company with 3 dispensaries, 1 extraction lab, and 1 cultivation center near the North Shore of Oahu. We have over 150 employees now, and we've been working with Adaptive HR to meet our human resource needs. We're super excited to work with them as we expand, and we've grown at least 2-3 times over the last 2 years. So we look forward to a good relationship with Adaptive, and come visit us in Hawaii anytime. Aloha.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are 2 productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Difference is building a solution for that individual. Not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the costs low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay 1 initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Hey, you want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information. Meet Caduceus Science, the alternative wellness company. You know CBD, but how about CBG, CBN? That's right, Caduceus Science produces a range of full-spectrum products, all lab-tested in small batches to maintain the highest quality of products. CaduceusScience.com. Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, it's Justin Benton, host of the Miracle Plant Podcast, where we discuss this miracle plant that goes by so many names and how it's helping people in so many extraordinary ways. So if you love this plant and you want to hear a story that tugs on those heartstrings and learn more about this plant, then head on over to the Miracle Plant Podcast. You'll be glad you did.